Oh my lord. Could it be? I think it is. Tactics Ogre Reborn is back, baby! There's still so much content that I want to make for this game, so despite getting quite distracted by various other games and projects, not to mention, life, I'm finally getting back on the train. Today, we're talking the Chapter 3 recruits, including Oelias and Dievold, as well as the major story beats that they have with Nybeth himself. There's also some named generics who have some funny reasons to mention them, so we'll do that too. Let's begin. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. If you know me, you know I'm a small creator making YouTube my full-time career, so if you enjoy my content, especially turn-based strategy RPGs and my coverage of them, a like and a subscription would be very much appreciated. Thank you. So, Oelias and Dievold. While you may run into this strange pair on other routes, it's only on neutral that you'll be able to add them to Denham's glorious little army. Dievold, the only unique recruitable TK in the game, and Oelias, a cleric, aren't the most glamorous recruits in the game, other than very slightly improved RT over generic options, -2 for Dievold compared to generic TKs, and -3 for Oelias compared to generic clerics. These two don't bring anything unique to the table mechanically. But what they do bring is some very interesting story, and some very valuable insight into everyone's favorite necromancer, Nybeth Abdelord himself. You see, much like Cressida on the Chaos route, long may she reign, is the ultimate waifu of Tactics Ogre, Oelias and Dievold are Nybeth's kids. Seeing as how they're a priest and something decidedly not, I'm sure you can imagine that there's some juicy story to be had here. And of course, if neutral is your first route, Oelias and Dievold will be welcome additions to the team, even despite the fact that they don't have any super unique mechanics going on, just due to the fact that there's a general lack of uniques on the route. And really, there's nothing wrong with them in general, they're just basic compared to insane bombs like, I don't know, the Farena sisters, Deneb, Habarim, etc., etc. Now, if you want to talk some actually lackluster units, there's those generics that I mentioned at the top of the video. They are, in no particular order, Chamos, Festa, Tamaz, and Elrig. These four are named generics, a wizard, a Valkyrie, a knight, and a cleric, respectively. The first three join alongside Habarim midway through Chapter 3 neutral, while Elrig joins midway through Chapter 4 neutral alongside Saria. These idiots have the misfortune of essentially being more Voltaires and Saras from the beginning of the game, but joining at a time when you've likely already built up a very solid fighting force of uniques and generics, and have little reason to train more unless you want to build someone into a specific class that you have yet to use. Indeed, of the four, Festa is really the only one to even have a slight benefit to consider, in that she has an RT of -2 compared to generic Valkyries. Tamaz has a flat 0 compared to knights, and Chamos, poor Chamos. Chamos is actually kind of notable in that he is actually slower than generic wizards. He is literally worse than a wizard that you could just get hired straight out of the shop. It's pretty sad. Pretty pretty sad case that this poor wizard has going on, to be quite honest. Meanwhile, Elrig has a -1 to his RT compared to generic clerics, so while yes, he is strictly speaking better than his contemporaries, it's really such a minor difference so late in the game that unless you're severely hurting for a good cleric, a dedicated healer, you can pass him up, honestly. This is made doubly rough for poor Elrig due to the fact that, you probably have Oelias, the named unique cleric, in your party right now, since she's someone that you get in Chapter 3 of neutral, and Elrig is someone that you get in Chapter 4 of neutral, and you can kind of see where this is going. It's a bad time for Elrig, man. Other than some potential stat improvements over their fellows, which are easily mitigated by gear and tarot cards anyway, there's functionally little reason to use most of this crew. That said, we like to be completionists in this house, and we like recruits, so we're going to get them anyway. It really is a shame that they join alongside some of the strongest characters in the game, though. It really just highlights how lowly they are. With that said, let's talk about how to acquire these characters. First up, Chamos, Tamaz, and Festa. And for these 3 sad sacks, your task is pretty simple. In Chapter 3, after you battle Gemp at Tenenmouth Hill, you're going to head to Chrysaro to meet up with Leonar about a little side mission. This needs to be done before you clear Port Ashton, so don't delay. Leonar will inform you about some of his soldiers who were captured at Cadriga and ask you to go help them out. Of course, we will. And of course, said soldiers are Chamos, Temaz, and Festa. You need to be ready here with fast units and healing and resurrection items, as this one can actually be kind of tricky if you're not prepared. When you arrive at the fort, you'll find that our recruits-to-be are face down in the dirt and quickly bleeding out. We need to save them, and to do so, you either need to res them and then keep them alive for the rest of the battle, or be a little bit of a speed demon and finish the battle before their death timers run out. Both of these objectives can be a little bit easier said than done if you're not prepared, so if it comes down to it, wingmen with the Lobber ability may be useful to keep the idiots alive if you choose to res them or you can't finish the battle fast enough. If you can clear the map before they pass on, it is the much easier path, but either way, you should be able to get it done without too much trouble, especially if you're doing this on a second or third playthrough using the world system. After the battle, the 3 musketeers will thank you for saving them and ask to join. Accept them if you want, and we can move on from their shenanigans. Next up, we have Oelias and Dievold. This is also a pretty simple one, honestly. It's definitely easier than the 3 musketeers that we just dealt with. In Chapter 3, you'll enter battle at Port Ashton as part of the story. Here, you'll find the 2 under attack from a swarm of the undead, and a familiar face as well. It's your job to rescue them, and fortunately this isn't too big of a deal, even if it is your first route. Dievold is plenty tanky, and Oelias can heal, and the pair will typically stick together, so they have some decent resilience. Just bring a cleric of your own, or maybe 2, if you want to be able to exorcise the dead and get some fat loot, and push forward with some of your fastest units. Archers, especially winged ones, will be able to take good advantage of your high starting position and the various roofs to rain hell down on the enemy, and the undead will do their best to clog up, narrow alleys and choke points, so don't waste too much time fighting them. Once you're able to meet up with the besieged siblings, you're all but guaranteed to succeed, finish clearing out the sorry meat sacks, and victory will be yours. In the following scene, you'll get some info about just who these 2 are and why they're here, and they'll ask if they can journey with you. Of course, you'll answer very well, you may join us, and they'll join on the spot. Finally, all that leaves is Elrig. To start off, clear the battle in Chapter 3 against Oz at Boed Fortress, where Saria needs to be protected and has difficulty moving as she's been hit with the Leaden status. There's really nothing special that you need to do in this fight, just keep Saria alive and clear the battle, same requirements as there are to recruit her herself. Once the battle is done with Saria alive, you'll then proceed through Chapter 3 and into Chapter 4. In Chapter 4, after the mission to save Saria's father, Arceus Maruva, head to Chrysaro and read a new Warren Report entry that will appear there, titled Pirates of Cadriga Fortress. This will trigger a new battle at Cadriga itself, but rather than fighting, ask Elrig, will you aid us? Which will end the battle and recruit both him and Saria. As far as builds are concerned, we're going to be pretty rapid fire here. There's nothing super spectacular to discuss, so let's just run down the list. As mentioned, the only one out of the 3 musketeers who's even really worth considering is Festa, and if you're planning on making a female generic of a particular class, she'll perform well with that -2 reduction to her RT. Keeping her as a Valkyrie is certainly a solid option thanks to the class's numerous strengths, or you can switch her to something slower like a Berserker if you want to mitigate some of the class's slow nature. The same can really be said for Elrig, although, again, -1 to RT and having a character that was leveled as a cleric really isn't the best starting point for a character. -1 RT is not that big of a deal, and the stats are going to be kind of but if you want it, go for it. And really, the less that we say of Temaz and Chamos, the better. For our actual uniques here, Dievold is perfectly happy as a bog-standard Terror Knight. Lament of the Dead, Fearful Impact, and Pincer Attack, or Rampart Aura, depending on if you're going more offensive or defensive, as well as, of course, your weapon skill of choice. I honestly like hammers and shields for a tankier style with Dievold, but your personal preference will work just fine. For spells, Instill Darkness is a must on all TKs who are planning on using any physical attacks, as is Drainheart for small damage at range, as well as self-healing. Nothing else in terms of spells is really that likely to hit, but, knock yourself out. Finally, for Oelias, she's a cleric, isn't she? However you would build Donalto or Olivia, you can do the same here. There's really not much to say about it, honestly. Clerics are quite nice to have, but they don't have much to discuss in a video like this. What I like to do, however, is actually make Oelias a Necromancer if you have the class unlocked. And before you roll your eyes or tell me that it wouldn't make story sense, hear me out here. I've got a reason. Thematically, this can actually be explained as Oelias choosing to use her father's techniques to aid her brother and potentially put a stop to Nybeth's schemes. Fight fire with fire, if you will. So, Pack things like Banish, Living Corpse, and utility spells like Life Force and Curse, and you'll be set. Story-wise, I think it really works, and speaking of story, there's one major component of the neutral route that we haven't discussed: the Palace of the Dead. Honestly, the number one reason that you want to pick up Dievold and Oelias is the story content that they have with Nybeth when you enter the Palace of the Dead, in the neutral route specifically. I don't really want to discuss it too in-depth here or really show anything about it, because this is truly some of my favorite writing in the game, and I don't want to spoil it for you. Not only is it fascinating and truly devastating dialogue from a character perspective, but it also adds a ton of absolutely juicy depth to Nybeth's character, so I highly recommend that you do it. All you need to do is head to Chapter 4 and progress until you unlock the, quote, mysterious blast at Exeter, unquote, talk entry in the Warren Report. Read it to unlock the Palace of the Dead, then head there. Proceed to level 5 and deploy both Dievold and Oelias. Note, this is a lengthy series of conversations, so you're going to want to pack items and spells to resurrect your units, heal your team, and exercise Nybeth's minions to keep them out of the fight. You also need to make sure that Nybeth, Dievold, and Oelias all stay alive, so stalling tactics, and again, the ability to protect your various units and keep Nybeth from potentially, like, blowing himself up somehow are all very important, because, again, this conversation takes a while to play out, but I promise you it's worth it. Just take my word on this one, all right? And I hope you enjoy. It shows the strength of Tactics Ogre's writing that such a powerful and impactful scene can come at the end of a character or a couple character storylines in the least played route of the game that gives so much depth to one of the game's best villains and teaches you so much about him in such a satisfying way. And it's these story moments that you can find on all the various different routes that make the writing of the game so compelling. So seriously, like I said, I hope you enjoy. I love it. It's super compelling stuff. But that said, that's pretty much all there is for this one. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. I know it's been forever and a day since we did any Tactics Ogre content on the channel, but I plan to return to it as often as time allows, both in terms of more videos and getting back to streaming. We've got to finish San Bronsa, do Coda, all that type of good stuff. If there are any topics that you'd like to see me cover for the game, whether it be story, characters, strategy, secrets, any of that type of stuff, let me know in the comments. That said, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.